Okay, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for this wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Just in addition to the introduction that you just made, I just wanted to also share that's effective this month. I'm also going to be taking a new role at the IFC. I'll be leading operations in manufacturing in the Africa region as far as new upstream business development is concerned.
Wow.
So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be
Congratulations.
here with.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. So I'm going to talk about improving manufacturing advisory operations in emerging markets in general. And when I was given this topic to speak about, I said maybe it's important we all take a step back and ask ourselves, why is it even important, right, for us to have manufacturing in emerging markets? And if it's okay for this presentation, let's just focus on Africa. So, from our experience, the development impact of manufacturing is more multi-dimensional. Okay, manufacturing facilitates trade, and it has a lot of linkages to the service sector. If you look at some of the statistics, manufacturing accounts for about 70% of global trade, manufactured goods. In the US, for example, 30 to 50% or 30 to 55% of service sector employment is linked to manufacturing. The next important multi-dimensional impact for manufacturing is research, development, and the adoption of standards. If you take research and development, for example, the manufacturing sector has expensed about 75% of total private sector R&D spending. In terms of standards, manufacturing is able to facilitate the adoption of formal international standards and best practices by firms and companies, right, that are able to enter the global value chain. There's also innovation and productivity, right? In terms of innovation, manufacturing historically has contributed a lot to innovation through creation and transfer of technology that is needed for development and growth. Productivity, which is the subject of a lot of the talk today. Manufacturing, if you just look at the contribution to productivity in the EU 15 plus, manufacturing share of that productivity growth is about 37%. The most important, the last but not the most important, is skills development and job creation. This is a very important aspect. In terms of skills, and I was just listening to Remy's presentation, the last part of it, when he's saying companies should train staff. Very important, they're very good points. But the companies themselves need to build the skills and capabilities needed before they can actually train the staff, right? And manufacturing fosters this. Manufacturing can foster skills development and transfer new skills that is needed to improve processes and products, and also the ability to absorb workers into formal employment. As you know, in a lot of emerging markets, and particularly in Africa, there's a lot of informal employment. And the manufacturing sector has a very good way of formalizing employment. And the last but not least will be jobs. Besides direct jobs that are created on factory floors, which is becoming less and less important because of automation, there's a whole indirect job and induced job effects, right? So there's different multiplier effects from direct to indirect employment. So for example, you have a manufacturing plant, there's linkages to jobs in distribution, in sales, in transportation, etc., right? And all these indirect jobs are there as a result of the manufacturing activity in place. So I think it's important that we all take a step back and first of all ask ourselves, why is it even important for companies and firms or countries to embark on this journey of manufacturing? So I'll stop there with this first slide, but just to set the stage. And this second slide here, in the IFC, our ambition is to unlock the value for manufacturing for development, right, while strengthening economic complexity. And you would realize very quickly that in terms of country capabilities and the stage of country development, there's very different types of manufacturing that you can do in different countries. Okay, so if you go to the least developed countries, you cannot set up certain types of manufacturing, right? You are not going to go to the poorest country and try to set up a full value chain of an automotive assembly there. It's just not going to work because the country is not at that stage of development, right? And then also, if you follow this vision of using manufacturing to strengthen economic complexity, you are not going to go to the most industrialized countries and then try to set up a very simple manufacturing activity that you can actually achieve elsewhere. Well, you can do that for other reasons. But if your goal is to use manufacturing to strengthen economic complexity, then you are not really helping that country. So our approach has been to group countries based on certain archetypes. Okay, we've created 3 pillars of countries. So pillar 1 is the least industrialized countries, the poorest countries, where in these countries our objective is to lay the foundation for industrial production. And there we try to do things like building commercially viable resource-based industries. Well, a lot of these countries are very rich in resources. You can name many, many countries. Take even cement, for example, right? A lot of countries have the limestone, they have the feldspar, and etc. There, your idea there is to add value to those resources. You take oil and gas, for example, right? And Nigeria is a perfect example with oil, where the idea there is you can add value to that oil resource and build a viable chemical industry. So the first stage there is we typically like to support countries to build viable and sustainable resource businesses. And then we also help countries in these markets to build supply chains and then also try to start integrating regionally. And then in addition to that, we build production for assembly of simple products that can enter global value chains. So you take a country like Ethiopia, for example, where in the textiles value chain, they're already making certain manufacturing of certain parts of the value chain that feeds into the global textile value chain, where the brands, most of which sits in the US and Europe, are beginning to source certain inputs from these countries. Now, the second pillar is countries that are a little bit more advanced, and you typically find these countries in Latin America. In Africa, I can think about South Africa. Here, the types of manufacturing that you engage in are a little bit different, right? You try to get into a little bit more sophisticated manufacturing, and there the goal is to help these countries to expand and diversify the manufacturing base. In there, you continue to build up foundational industries, but you go to more and more sophisticated activities. Like I said, you're trying to push the complexity envelope. You develop local products and solutions, focusing on local markets. And here again, you begin to help local brands to emerge that can compete globally. And then finally, you help countries to become more competitive, not just in one global value chain. So let's say a country enters the textile value chain, you can also help them to enter another global value chain, like the automotive value chain, like we've seen South Africa now is in the global value chain of most of the major OEM manufacturers of cars, right? And in the more advanced emerging market, and things that you can pack very, very different, because then you enter the next 2 things that I have on this slide, which is the process and the value chain, right? The process with which you use to make that product, and then where this company is playing in the value chain. Okay, you can have a very sophisticated product like the iPhone, for example. Okay, but if the company is only just doing assembly, meaning the chips come from South Korea, the glass screen comes from Singapore, the design comes from the US, and the company is just doing the assembly somewhere in China. Yes, it's a very complex product. It's a very complex product. Excuse me, can you please mute your lines? Thank you. It's a very complex product, but at the end of the day, they just play in a very, very small part of the value chain, right? Even though it's a global value chain, a lot of pieces come together. The company is just doing the final assembly, right? So there's all these dynamics that we have to look at and that we have to think about when we are working at the company level. Okay. So with that, let me just take you to how is all this implemented at the firm level, at the company level. So IFC is committed to strengthen and build productive real sector companies across the African continent. Okay, we believe that industrialization is key to achieving structural transformation in African countries and creating jobs. To achieve this, IFC is improving an array of investment of advisory solutions in different clients, countries, and sectors. What we've seen is that manufacturing companies particularly in Africa, have limited access to know-how and best international standards. Okay, and also, like Remy said in his last presentation, the skilled resources. If you think about labor force, and expertise, right? We are very in the African context, if you compare to other regions and other companies, it's very limited. Okay, so there's just not one issue facing these companies, right? There's a whole host of issues facing these companies. We even have things like management capacity at the level of the firms. It's also difficult in addition to all the volatile markets. So our approach has been, in addition to the investments that we do, we also have advisory services, and then we have an assessment that is targeted and designed to address these needs. Okay, and this assessment is normally done at the company level, at the firm level, and then it's geared towards gaining more insight into how these firms stand vis-a-vis best practices. Okay, highlighting areas that can be improved across key operational functions. Okay, and supporting the company and management to prioritize actions and investments that need to be taken in order for them to reach their strategic goals. ISP is utilizing its global expertise in this area. We have a large footprint and we have a large manufacturing team, and we like to deliver this holistic approach to companies in the sub-Saharan African context. Now, this is critical for productivity, right? Because the issues facing uh, most of these firms is not single one issue, right? It's normally multi-dimensional issues that come together. And for a firm to become productivity, they have to become productive. They have to address all these issues, right? And it's not only a matter of remaining profitable, but it's also a matter of remaining profitable for the long term, right? Sustainability. So to answer how firms can remain profitable and also sustainable for the long term, companies need to answer very, very difficult questions, right? So company owners and managers often ask themselves, are they doing the right things? Okay. And if they are doing the right things, are they actually positioning themselves well for the future? There's questions related to growth. Okay. And there, in our assessment, the kind of things that we help companies to kind of questions we help companies to address is whether these companies are growing in a sustainable way. Okay. And how long can these companies actually sustain that growth? Okay. And are there what we like to call time bombs that the companies are overlooking? And these time bombs could either be internal and external. Okay. It could be in the market or it could be in the sector as a whole, right? Just think about um, how technology has changed certain sectors, right? Certain sectors have become obsolete just because of technology. And we like to think through all this with companies, whether they are focusing on the right sectors and whether they are positioning themselves to be sustainable over the long term. And also, there's questions around fluctuation and stagnation, right? And there are questions such as, why do company initiatives not bring long-lasting results, and how can companies actually stabilize their operations? And then finally, how they can even organize themselves to adapt more rapidly. And then for companies that are experiencing decline, the question there becomes whether they understand the root cause of the decline. Is this something that's happening internally, or are they just participating in an industry that is in decline? And in that case, even if you're the best in such an industry, you still experience decline, even if you are first in breed. Okay, and why are they losing control? And are they losing control? And what are the options that they have in terms of stabilizing and reversing that decline? So all these, the question of productivity, why I go through all this is that the and then we help the companies to connect the dots and support prioritization of improvement interventions, right? Which is needed to keep these companies, first of all, sustainable, and second of all, improve their productivity. Now, the value proposition here is we provide a status overview of the current performance vis-a-vis international best practices. And it's also an impartial opinion that IFC provides as a result of its global expertise to companies in emerging markets. And then we help companies determine next steps in terms of how they can move forward with the management of the firm. So some of the lower cost, right? For example, a lot of firms in the Africa region import critical intermediate goods. Even look at what has happened with COVID. You can see that it's good for companies to have a more reliable source of supply of input materials. In resources, as you know, there's energy, and then there's all this whole area of environmental and emissions and safe environmental practices. And there, we like to ask questions like, look, are companies managing these risks appropriately? And if you are in an area, let's say a chemical area or an oil and gas area, how is this company managing risks in this area, right? Or in the area of water and energy consumption, how efficient is the use of water and energy? Because ultimately, if that's not efficient, it's going to lead to very high cost, right? Very high production cost, and that would lead to lower productivity compared to peers that the company competes with around the globe. I'd like to end this presentation. I think my time is up. We can pick it up more during the Q&A with a case study that we did in Zambia, just to give you the type of profile that we've worked out and some of the expected results. So this was a company in Zambia. We did a productivity assessment. Okay, the company actually produces copper cable batteries, aluminum pots, and it's a manufacturer, right? And then here, I would like to tie this back to the first couple of slides that I had. Here, the idea was to help this company build product and process complexity. They were doing simple pots like aluminum pots, cooking pots, and we helped them to get into more sophisticated products like copper wires and batteries and so on. So there we help them to increase their product complexity, if you remember how I started this presentation. In the process of doing that, if you are going to produce a more complicated product, you also have to use more advanced technology, and you have to build your know-how and capabilities at the firm level, right, at the company level. So in the process of doing that, we also help the company bring in the latest technology, the most efficient technologies, and they were able to enhance and develop their manufacturing process. So the clients here, what they needed here is they wanted to expand their scrap metal recycling and manufacturing business, and but their management capacity and ability to manage the growth and diversification of their business was very limited. The company also faced external constraints like volatile pricing on its main inputs, and then also rising costs of resources like electricity. So here we went through the assessment with the company, the key elements of the assessment that I outlined on the previous slides. And then the IFC assessment provided recommendations on how the firm could improve its bottom line through improving its operational practices in sales forecasting, planning, supply chain management, corporate governance, resource efficiency, and the manufacturing process. So there is expected results here. The company can achieve reduce its energy bill by 30 to 40%. Okay, increase output by 15 to 20% by avoiding waste, improve the quality of its products, and last but not least, become more robust in terms of its corporate governance. So, in conclusion, just to conclude my presentation, all these 4 bullet points in the expected results box to the right are things that enhance the productivity of companies. And the key message I want to leave with you is the productivity question with manufacturing companies in Africa is not about one thing. Okay, it's multi-dimensional. We often encounter companies that need not just one thing, but sponsors that need help with corporate governance because it's someone that owns their shop and they don't have a succession plan, or a company that's not very efficient at resources, right? Or a company that doesn't have very good manufacturing process, or a company that is not well positioned in its value chain, right? Maybe they are making a product that's very simple and they are not at a point or where in the value chain that they can capture good margins to stay sustainable. Or it's just a company that they're making a very simple product and they are not introducing new methodologies and technologies to help them move to the next level of complexity. So with that, I'll stop here. Thank you very much.